The elegant storefront of Pembroke and Fills on London's Bond Street gleamed in the early morning light, its pristine windows displaying the latest spring collection from the most coveted designers in Europe. Inside, Alexandra Bennett methodically moved her mop across the marble floors, taking pride in the way the surface shone beneath her careful attention. At 28, she wasn't where she had imagined herself to be, but she approached her work with the same dedication she had once applied to her business management studies at university. The store wouldn't open for another hour, but Alexandra could already hear the clicking heels of the sales associates arriving for their morning meeting. She kept her head down, focusing on her task as their voices carried across the empty space, discussing their sales targets and the latest designer arrivals. Their conversations always centered around commission percentages and who had secured the biggest sales the previous day. "Did you see? The Valentino collection just arrived." Miranda Rothschild's voice echoed through the store. As the head sales associate, she carried herself with an air of superiority that seemed to grow with each successful sale. "I've already reserved the best pieces for Mrs. Hampshire. She's coming in this afternoon." Alexandra smiled to herself, remembering how Mrs. Hampshire had confided in her just yesterday about wanting to explore other designers. The elderly woman often stopped to chat with Alexandra during her visits, claiming she was the only genuine person in the store. These small interactions were what made Alexandra's job bearable, even as she dreamed of something more. The morning progressed typically until just after 11, when the bell above the door chimed. Alexandra glanced up from where she was cleaning the jewelry display cases to see a man shuffling through the entrance. His appearance immediately caught her attention, not because of any designer label he wore, but because of its complete absence. His coat was weathered, his shoes scuffed, and his grey hair unkempt beneath a worn flat cap. The reaction from the sales floor was immediate. Miranda's perfectly manicured hand flew to her throat as she exchanged alarmed glances with her colleagues. Two security guards stationed by the door straightened, their hands moving to their earpieces. But before anyone could approach the man, Alexandra noticed something in his bearing that made her pause. Despite his disheveled appearance, he carried himself with an underlying confidence that seemed at odds with his attire. Setting aside her cleaning supplies, Alexandra approached him with a warm smile. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Pembroke and Fills. May I help you find something today?" The man's eyes, sharp and intelligent beneath his shaggy brows, met hers with interest. "Yes, actually. I'm looking for a suit, something for a special occasion." Behind them, Alexandra heard Miranda's derisive snort, followed by whispered comments about wasting time and calling security. But Alexandra chose to ignore them, focusing instead on the gentleman before her. "Of course, sir, we have an excellent selection. Would you mind telling me about the occasion?" "That would help me guide you toward the most suitable options." The man's weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. "A wedding, perhaps. Something that would make quite an impression." "Oh, wonderful, congratulations," Alexandra responded genuinely, already moving toward the menswear section. "We have some beautiful pieces that would be perfect for such a special day. Would you prefer something traditional or more contemporary?" As she led him through the store, Alexandra noticed Miranda and the other sales associates huddled together, watching with a mixture of horror and amusement. She could practically hear their thoughts. What was the cleaning lady doing, playing at being a sales associate? How dare she approach a client, especially one who clearly couldn't afford anything in the store? But Alexandra had learned long ago not to judge by appearances. During her university years, before financial hardship had forced her to abandon her studies, one of her professors had taught her that true luxury wasn't about the price tag. It was about how you made people feel. The gentleman seemed to appreciate her approach, asking thoughtful questions about fabric choices and tailoring options. As they discussed various suits, Alexandra found herself drawing on her business knowledge, explaining the craftsmanship behind each piece and the heritage of the different designers they carried. "How you seem to know quite a bit about fashion and business for someone who—" The man trailed off, gesturing vaguely at her cleaning uniform. Alexandra smiled, a hint of pride in her voice. "I studied business management at university, sir. Life took an unexpected turn, but I believe every job deserves our best effort. Besides, I learn something new every day here, even if it's not quite the education I had planned." The man's eyes twinkled with an unreadable expression. "Indeed, Miss Bennett. Alexandra Bennett. Well, Miss Bennett, You've been most helpful. I think I'll need some time to consider my options, but I appreciate your assistance today." As the man turned to leave, Miranda finally approached, her voice dripping with disdain. "Sir, I apologize for any confusion. In the future, please know that our sales associates are better qualified to assist you with any purchases. Our cleaning staff should not be bothering our clients." The man paused, looking between Miranda and Alexandra with an inscrutable expression. "Is that so?" he murmured, before nodding politely and walking out of the store. Alexandra returned to her cleaning duties, her cheeks burning with embarrassment, as Miranda and the others laughed about the vagrant who had dared to waste their time. But something about the encounter left her feeling unsettled, as if she had just been part of a scene in a play where she didn't quite know her role. Little did she know, this seemingly ordinary Tuesday was about to change her life forever, and the man in the tattered coat would prove to be far more than he appeared. The following morning, Alexandra arrived at Pembroke and Fils to find an unusual commotion. The store manager, Mr. Phillips, was pacing nervously in front of his office, his typically immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. The sales team huddled in small groups, whispering amongst themselves with worried expressions. "Apparently, Mr. Edward Blackwood himself is coming today," she overheard one of the junior sales associates say, her voice trembling with anxiety. "The owner of the entire Pembroke and Fils chain." Alexandra's hands stilled on her mop as she processed this information. Everyone knew about Edward Blackwood, the retail magnate who had transformed Pembroke and Fils from a single family-owned boutique into Britain's most prestigious luxury retail chain. He was notorious for his hands-on approach to management and his unconventional methods of evaluating his stores. The morning crawled by with an almost unbearable tension. Miranda had changed her outfit 3 times, each ensemble more expensive than the last. The security team had polished every surface twice, and Mr. Phillips had checked and rechecked the sales figures so many times that his hands shook when holding the papers. At precisely 11 o'clock, the same time as yesterday's peculiar visitor, the store's door opened. Alexandra, who was organizing the cleaning supplies in her cart, froze as she recognized the man who entered. Gone was the tattered coat and worn flat cap. Instead, Edward Blackwood strode in wearing an impeccably tailored Savile Row suit, his grey hair now neatly trimmed and styled. The recognition dawned on the sales team's faces one by one, followed by varying degrees of horror as they remembered their behavior from the previous day. Miranda's perfectly painted face turned an alarming shade of white. "Good morning," Blackwood's voice carried across the store with quiet authority. "I believe we all have some matters to discuss." His eyes scanned the room until they found Alexandra, and he offered her a small smile. "Miss Bennet, would you mind joining us in the conference room?" The next hour passed in a blur of revelations and decisions. Edward Blackwood had indeed orchestrated yesterday's visit as part of his regular mystery shopping program, designed to evaluate customer service across all his stores. What he had witnessed, he explained in measured tones, was exactly what he had been trying to root out of his company: elitism, discrimination, and a toxic sales culture that prioritized commissions over genuine customer care. "So in my experience," Blackwood addressed the room, "true luxury isn't just about the products we sell, it's about the experience we create, the respect we show to every person who walks through our doors, and the values we uphold as a company." He turned to Alexandra. "Ms. Bennet demonstrated everything I look for in a leader: genuine care for others, extensive product knowledge, and an understanding that every interaction matters." Mr. Phillips shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Sir, with all due respect, Alexandra is our cleaning staff. She has no sales experience." "On the contrary," Blackwood interrupted, pulling out a folder. "Ms. Bennet had nearly completed her business management degree at LSE before financial circumstances forced her to leave. She has been studying our business from the ground up, learning every aspect of our operation while being consistently overlooked for her current position." Alexandra sat in stunned silence as Blackwood continued to outline the changes he wanted to implement. The current sales team, with their discriminatory practices and failure to uphold company values, would be let go immediately. In their place, he wanted to build a new team, one focused on genuine customer service and inclusive luxury retail. "Ms. Bennet," he turned to her, I would like to offer you the position of Customer Experience Coordinator for this location. You'll be responsible for training new staff and implementing a fresh approach to customer service based on the principles you naturally demonstrated yesterday. The position comes with a substantial salary increase and, should you wish, the opportunity to complete your degree with company sponsorship. The conference room fell silent. Alexandra felt tears pricking at her corners of her eyes as years of pushed-aside dreams suddenly rushed back to the surface. I would be honored, Mr. Blackwood." As the meeting concluded and the shell-shocked sales team filed out to receive their termination notices, Blackwood held Alexandra back. "There was something else you said yesterday that caught my attention," he said, his expression softening, "about learning something new every day, even if it wasn't the education you had planned. That's exactly the kind of perspective I've been looking for in this company." Alexandra smiled, still trying to process the monumental changes happening in her life. "I believe every experience teaches us something valuable, Mr. Blackwood. Sometimes the most important lessons come from unexpected places." "Indeed they do, Miss Bennett. Indeed they do." He paused, checking his watch. "Now, I believe we have a store to transform. Are you ready to begin?" As Alexandra stood up, straightening her cleaning uniform for what would be the last time, she felt a surge of determination. This was more than just a promotion. It was an opportunity to prove that kindness and genuine service could transform not just a store but people's lives. Little did she know that this transformation would extend far beyond the walls of Pembroke and Phil's, and that Edward Blackwood's interest in her potential would grow into something neither of them had anticipated. The following weeks at Pembroke and Phil's were a whirlwind of change. Alexandra's first task as Customer Experience Coordinator was to help assemble a new sales team, one that would reflect the inclusive vision she and Mr. Blackwood had discussed. Gone were the days of commission-based incentives that encouraged aggressive sales tactics. Instead, she implemented a system that rewarded customer satisfaction and team collaboration. "Remember," Alexandra addressed her newly hired team during their first training session, "our goal isn't just to sell luxury items, it's to create an experience that makes every person who walks through that door feel valued." She stood confidently at the front of the store's newly renovated training room, wearing a simple but elegant navy suit, her first purchase with her employee discount. Among her new hires was James Chen, a former art history professor who had left academia seeking a more dynamic environment, and Sarah O'Connor, a retired West End costume designer whose knowledge of fabrics and construction was unparalleled. Each team member brought unique perspectives and experiences that would help reshape the store's approach to luxury retail. Edward Blackwood made frequent visits during these early days, though his presence was markedly different from his first undercover appearance. He often arrived unannounced, moving through the store with quiet attention, observing the changes Alexandra was implementing. She couldn't help but notice how his eyes would linger on her during these visits, how he would find reasons to extend their conversations beyond business matters. One particular Tuesday afternoon, as autumn rain drummed against the store's windows, he appeared in her office doorway. "Ms. Bennett, might I have a moment of your time?" Alexandra looked up from the customer feedback reports she'd been analyzing. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood, please come in." He settled into the chair across from her desk, his manner more relaxed than usual. "I've been reviewing the store's performance numbers for the past month," he began, placing a folder on her desk. "They're impressive, to say the least." Alexandra smiled, pride warming her chest. "The team has really embraced the new approach. Just yesterday, we had a young student come in looking for his first interview suit. In the past, he might have been dismissed, but Sarah spent 2 hours helping him find something within his budget. She even gave him tips for his interview." "And did he make a purchase?" "He did, but more importantly, he left feeling confident and respected. His mother came in this morning to thank us and bought 3 designer handbags for herself." Blackwood's eyes crinkled with pleasure. "You've created something remarkable here, Alexandra. Something I've been trying to achieve across all our stores for years." He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "Which is why I'd like to discuss an opportunity with you." Alexandra's heart skipped a beat as he continued. "I'm establishing a new position at the corporate level, National Training Director. The role would involve implementing your customer service model across all Pembroke and Phil's locations in the UK. You'd be based here in London, but there would be considerable travel involved. The opportunity was beyond anything Alexandra had imagined when she'd started at Pembroke and Phil's as a cleaning lady just months ago. Yet something in Blackwood's manner suggested there was more to this offer than professional advancement. I'm honored, she began, her mind racing with possibilities. But may I ask why me? Surely there are more experienced candidates. Blackwood leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. Experience isn't everything, Alexandra. What you possess is far rarer. Genuine empathy combined with business acumen. You see people, not just potential sales. You understand that luxury isn't about exclusivity, but about making everyone feel extraordinary. Their eyes met across the desk, and for a moment the air seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. Alexandra felt her cheeks warm under his intense gaze. "Would you consider having dinner with me tomorrow evening?" he asked suddenly. "To discuss the position in more detail, of course." Alexandra's heart raced at the invitation. She knew this wasn't just about business. The slight nervousness in his voice, so unlike his usual confident manner, told her that much. "I would like that," she heard herself say. "Excellent. I'll have my driver collect you at 7. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Alexandra. Perhaps we could make it Edward and Alexandra, rather than Mr. Blackwood and Miss Bennet, at least outside of work hours." After he left, Alexandra sat at her desk, her mind spinning with the day's developments. The promotion offer was incredible, but it was the dinner invitation that made her pulse quicken. She had tried to ignore the growing attraction between them, convincing herself it was merely professional admiration. Now, however, she couldn't deny the possibility of something more. As she gathered her things to leave that evening, she passed through the store's main floor. The space had been transformed under her leadership, not just in its appearance but in its energy. The intimidating atmosphere had been replaced by one of warmth and welcome. Looking around at what she'd helped create, Alexandra felt a surge of confidence about the changes ahead, both professional and personal. What she couldn't know was that the dinner tomorrow would mark the beginning of a journey far more complex and rewarding than either of them could imagine, and that the greatest challenges and victories still lay ahead. The sleek black Bentley arrived precisely at 7, just as Edward had promised. Alexandra smoothed down her emerald silk dress, another recent purchase from Pembroke and Phil's, and tried to calm her nerves as the driver held the door open for her. The car glided through London's evening traffic, eventually pulling up to a Georgian townhouse in Mayfair that made her catch her breath. "Mr. Blackwood prefers to entertain at home," the driver explained, noticing her surprise. "He says restaurants lack the proper atmosphere for meaningful conversation." As Alexandra ascended the steps to the front door, it opened to reveal Edward wearing a casual but perfectly tailored blazer. "Alexandra," he greeted her warmly, "welcome to my home." The interior was nothing like she'd imagined. Instead of the ostentatious display of wealth she'd expected from one of Britain's most successful businessmen, the space was elegant but comfortable. Bookshelves lined the walls, and she noticed with interest that many volumes showed signs of frequent use. "I hope you don't mind," Edward said, leading her through to a cozy dining room, "but I've arranged for dinner to be served here. I thought we might be more comfortable speaking freely." The table was intimately set for 2, with candles casting a warm glow across fine china and crystal. A bottle of wine was already breathing beside 2 delicate glasses. "It's perfect," Alexandra replied, taking in the thoughtful arrangement. As she sat down, she noticed a familiar book on the sideboard, The Psychology of Customer Experience by Professor Helen Martinez. "You've read Professor Martinez's work?" Edward's eyes lit up as he poured the wine. "Actually, I had the pleasure of studying under her at Cambridge. Her theories about emotional connection in retail environments heavily influenced my early business strategies." He paused, studying Alexandra with interest. "But I suspect you already knew that, given how you've implemented many of her principles at the store." Alexandra felt her cheeks warm. "I came across her book during my studies at LSE. Even after I had to leave university, I continued reading whatever I could get my hands on. The public library became my second home." "Tell me about that time," Edward said softly, as the first course was served. "What led you to leave your studies?" Alexandra took a sip of wine, gathering her thoughts. "My father became ill during my final year. The medical bills. Well, they consumed everything we had, including my university fund. I couldn't bear the thought of him worrying about my education while he was unwell, so I left to work full-time. And now he's, Edward asked gently. Recovered, thankfully. He's teaching mathematics at a primary school in Manchester now. He's always been happiest helping others learn. Edward nodded thoughtfully. That explains a lot about you, actually. Your natural inclination to teach and nurture others' growth. He leaned forward slightly. You know, when I saw you that first day in the store, teaching me about the suits as if I were any other customer, I knew I'd found something special. Is that why you were there? Alexandra asked, curiosity getting the better of her. Testing the stores in disguise? Edward's expression turned contemplative. Partially, but there was something more. He stood up and walked to one of the bookshelves, returning with a framed photograph. This was my mother, he said, passing it to Alexandra. The photograph showed a woman in a cleaner's uniform, standing proudly outside what appeared to be an older version of Pembroke and Phil's. She worked as a cleaner at the original store for 30 years, Edward explained. When old Mr. Pembroke started having heart troubles, she was the one who noticed his symptoms and insisted he see a doctor. She saved his life, and in gratitude, he put me through university and later gave me the opportunity to buy into the business. Alexandra studied the photograph, understanding dawning. So when you visit the stores in disguise, I'm honoring her memory, Edward completed, remembering that kindness and worth aren't determined by someone's position or appearance. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. When I saw you with your mop and bucket, treating everyone with equal dignity despite how others treated you, you reminded me so much of her. The evening progressed with shared stories and discoveries. Alexandra learned about Edward's journey from scholarship student to business owner, while she shared her dreams of transforming luxury retail into a more inclusive industry. As they talked, the line between professional admiration and personal connection began to blur. Over dessert, a perfectly crafted crème brûlée, Edward broached the subject of the National Training Director position again. I want you to know, he said carefully, that this offer stands completely independent of whatever might be developing between us. Your talent and vision are what the company needs, regardless of anything else. Alexandra appreciated his directness. Thank you for saying that. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't wondered about the timing. Then let me be completely clear, Edward said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. I'm offering you this position because you're the most qualified person for it, and I'm sitting here having dinner with you because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the moment you showed kindness to a shabby-looking stranger in a designer store. As the evening drew to a close, Edward walked Alexandra to the door. The air between them crackled with possibility, but he maintained a respectful distance. Take some time to think about the position, he said softly. But perhaps, regardless of your decision, we could have dinner again. Alexandra smiled, feeling more certain of her path forward than she had in years. I'd like that very much. As the Bentley carried her home through the lamp-lit London streets, Alexandra reflected on the evening's revelations. She had expected to learn about a new job opportunity, but instead, she had discovered something far more valuable, a connection with someone who understood both where she came from and where she hoped to go. What she didn't know was that their budding relationship would soon face its first major test, as the past was about to come knocking at Pembroke and Phil's door. The morning headlines on Alexandra's tablet made her coffee turn bitter in her mouth. Scandal at luxury retailer. Former employees allege discrimination, screamed the Daily Telegraph's business section. Below the headline was a photo of Miranda Rothschild, her former colleague, looking perfectly coiffed and suitably aggrieved as she posed outside the Bond Street store. It's a systematic pattern of unfair dismissal, Miranda was quoted saying. Dedicated employees with years of experience were replaced overnight, all because of one man's whim and his personal interests. The insinuation in those last words was clear enough to make Alexandra's hands shake. Her phone buzzed with a message from Edward. Don't read the papers. Coming to the store now. Everything will be fine. But Alexandra couldn't stop reading. The article detailed allegations from several former employees, claiming they were dismissed without proper cause to make way for the owner's latest fascination. Miranda had carefully avoided mentioning Alexandra by name, But the implications were clear, suggesting that her promotion was the result of something other than merit. When Edward arrived at the store 30 minutes later, his usual composed demeanor showed signs of strain. He found Alexandra in her office, surrounded by printouts of various news articles and social media posts. The story had already gone viral. "I should have seen this coming," Edward said, closing the door behind him. "Miranda's father is on the board of our biggest competitor. This isn't just about revenge. It's about damaging our reputation." Alexandra stood up, pacing the room. "They're making it sound like I'm some sort of—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I know exactly what they're implying." Edward's voice was tight with controlled anger. "And we're going to fight it. I've already called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. I want you there." "Me?" Alexandra's eyes widened. "But wouldn't that just fuel their allegations about favoritism?" Edward moved closer, his expression intense. "Alexandra, you earned your position through merit and hard work. The store's performance numbers prove it. Our customer satisfaction ratings have never been higher, and sales have increased by 30% since you took over. Running away now would only give credence to their lies." Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. James Chen, one of her new hires, entered with a concerned expression. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but you both need to see this. Miranda is outside the store with a news crew." They moved to the window, watching as Miranda held court on the sidewalk, gesturing dramatically at the store behind her. A small crowd had gathered, some filming with their phones. "She's claiming that the store now discriminates against wealthy customers," James reported, reading from his phone. "Says we've abandoned our heritage of exclusive luxury service in favor of— oh, this is ridiculous— pandering to window shoppers and social climbers." Alexandra felt her initial shock and hurt giving way to determination. "She's right about one thing," she said quietly. "We have abandoned the old way of doing things, and I'm proud of that." Edward watched her carefully. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time to show everyone exactly what the new Pembroke and Phils stands for." She turned to James. "Call the team together, all of them, and contact every customer who's written a positive review or testimonial in the past 3 months. See who'd be willing to speak to the press about their experience here." Edward's face broke into a proud smile. "Using customer voices to counter their narrative. Brilliant. Also," Alexandra continued, her mind racing with possibilities, "let's pull the data on our community outreach program, the one where we help unemployed individuals prepare for job interviews, and the sales figures showing how our new approach has actually increased our high-end purchases while making luxury accessible to a broader market." As James hurried off to gather the information, Edward reached for Alexandra's hand. "Are you sure you want to face this head-on? There might be some personal cost." "The press can be brutal." Alexandra squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his support. "I've spent my whole life being underestimated. The cleaner who wanted to study business, the shop girl who dared to dream bigger. I won't let them reduce everything we've built here to a scandal. Our team deserves better than that. The store deserves better." Edward's expression softened with admiration. "I knew there was a reason I fell in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, spoken for the first time in the midst of crisis. Alexandra's heart skipped a beat as she realized what he'd said. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent message. The board meeting had been moved up. They were gathering in an hour. The news coverage was spreading, and shareholders were demanding immediate action. "We should get ready for the board," Alexandra said, though she didn't let go of Edward's hand. "But Edward, I love you too, and we're going to fight this together." As they prepared to face the board, Alexandra felt a curious sense of calm. The path ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in her life she knew exactly who she was and what she stood for. Miranda and her allies had unleashed their attack, thinking they would find weakness. Instead, they would discover just how strong someone could become when they had truth and love stands on their side. The real battle was just beginning, and Alexandra was ready to show the world exactly what the daughter of a mathematics teacher and the son of a cleaning lady could achieve when they refused to be defined by others' expectations. The Pembroke and Phil's boardroom, situated on the top floor of their corporate headquarters, had always intimidated Alexandra. Today, however, as she stood before the 12 board members with her presentation ready, she felt strangely empowered. Edward sat at the head of the table, his presence both professional and supportive. "Lady and gentlemen of the board," Alexandra began, her voice steady, "I know you've all seen this morning's news. I'm here to show you not just why these allegations are false, but why our new direction is vital for the future of Pembroke and Fils." She gestured to the screen behind her, where charts and graphs appeared. "In the 3 months since we implemented our new customer service model, our sales have increased by 30%. More importantly, our customer retention rate has risen to 95%, the highest in the company's history." One of the board members, Sir Richard Pembroke, grandson of the original founder, leaned forward. "Ms. Bennett, these numbers are impressive, but Miss Rothschild's allegations suggest that we're diluting the brand's exclusivity. How do you respond to that?" Alexandra smiled, clicking to the next slide. "I believe these figures will answer that question. Our sales of high-end items, those priced over $10,000, have actually increased by 40%. But here's what's interesting. 60% of these purchases were made by first-time luxury buyers who initially came to us for more modest items." She moved through the presentation with confidence, showing testimonials from customers across the economic spectrum. There was the young barrister who bought his first court suit from them, then returned to purchase his wedding attire. The grandmother who felt comfortable enough to bring her teenage granddaughter shopping for her prom dress and ended up becoming a regular customer herself. "What we've created," Alexandra explained, "isn't just a store. It's a relationship with our customers. When people feel valued, they remain loyal. They tell their friends. They come back for life's important moments." Another board member, Patricia Winters, adjusted her glasses. "And what about these community outreach programs you've implemented? How do they benefit our bottom line?" Alexandra's eyes lit up. "Let me show you something remarkable." She clicked to a new slide. "Our Dress for Success workshop series, which helps job seekers prepare for interviews, has not only generated positive press, but has created a new customer base. 80% of participants return to make a purchase within 6 months of securing employment. More importantly, they become brand ambassadors, spreading positive word of mouth that no advertising budget could buy." The presentation continued for another hour, with Alexandra addressing every concern raised by the board. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before Sir Richard spoke again. "I must admit, Ms. Bennett, when Edward first told us about promoting a cleaning lady to management, I had my doubts, but these results—" He shook his head in amazement. "Well, they speak for themselves." Edward stood up, taking his place beside Alexandra. "I propose we hold a press conference tomorrow morning. Let's show the world exactly what the modern Pembroke and Fils stands for." The board's vote was unanimous in their favor. As the members filed out, Patricia Winters paused beside Alexandra. "My mother was a cleaner too," she said quietly. "She would have loved to see this day." Later that evening, Alexandra and Edward sat in his office planning the press conference. The sun was setting over London, casting a golden glow through the windows. "You were magnificent today," Edward said, watching as she organized her notes. "I wish my mother could have seen you." Alexandra looked up, touched by the emotion in his voice. "Tell me more about her," she said softly. Edward moved to the window, his profile silhouetted against the evening sky. "She always said that true class had nothing to do with money. It was about how you treated people." He turned back to Alexandra. "When she passed away, I promised myself I would build something that would have made her proud. But it wasn't until I met you that I really understood how to do that." Alexandra stood and joined him at the window. "Tomorrow will be challenging," she said. "The press will try to twist everything we say." "Let them try," Edward replied, taking her hand. "We have something they don't understand. Authenticity. Miranda and her allies are fighting to preserve a world of artificial barriers and exclusivity. We're building something real." As they stood together, watching the city lights begin to twinkle in the gathering dusk, Alexandra felt a deep sense of rightness. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together. "Edward," she said suddenly, "I've been thinking about the National Training Director position." He turned to her, his expression curious. "And I want to accept it, not just because of us, but because what we're doing here is important. It needs to spread beyond one store." Edward's face broke into a warm smile. "I was hoping you'd say that. But first we have a press conference to prepare for. Are you ready to tell our story to the world?" Alexandra squeezed his hand. Our story? Yes, I think I am. After all, it's a story about breaking down barriers, about seeing the potential in people, about love transforming not just lives, but an entire business. As they began planning their strategy for the next day, both knew that this was just the beginning. The press conference would mark a turning point, not just for them, but for the future of Pembroke and Phil's. The world was about to learn what happened when two people dared to reimagine what luxury retail could be and fell in love along the way. The morning of the press conference dawned bright and clear over London. Alexandra stood before the mirror in her office at Pembroke and Phil's, adjusting her cream silk blouse. The outfit she had chosen, a tailored navy suit paired with elegant but understated accessories, reflected exactly what she wanted to communicate: professionalism, authenticity, and quiet confidence. A gentle knock at the door revealed Sarah O'Connor, the former costume designer turned sales associate, holding a small box. "A little something from the team," she said, opening it to reveal a beautiful vintage Pembroke and Phil's brooch. "It belonged to my grandmother. She bought it here in 1952 when she got her first job as a secretary. The sales assistant back then was kind to her, even though she could only afford one small piece. She never forgot that kindness." Alexandra's eyes welled up as Sarah pinned the brooch to her lapel. "It's perfect," she whispered, touching the delicate silver piece. "Thank you." The store's main floor had been transformed for the press conference. Rows of chairs faced a small podium, while along the walls displays showcased photographs and stories from their community outreach programs. The entire sales team stood ready, each wearing a badge that told their own unique story. From James Chen's journey from academia to retail, to young Tommy Williams, a former Dress for Success participant who now worked as their junior sales associate. Edward met her near the podium, looking distinguished in a charcoal suit. "The press is gathering outside," he said softly. "Miranda's there too, with her lawyers." He paused, studying her face. "Are you ready?" Alexandra touched the brooch on her lapel. "More than ready. It's time to share our truth." The doors opened, and journalists filed in, followed by camera crews and photographers. Miranda sat in the front row, her expression a mixture of smugness and anticipation. But Alexandra's attention was drawn to some unexpected faces in the crowd. Several of their regular customers had come to show support, including Mrs. Hampshire, who gave her an encouraging wink. Edward stepped up to the podium first. "Good morning, and thank you all for coming. Recent allegations have been made about Pembroke and Phil's business practices and corporate culture. Today we're here to address these claims and share our vision for the future of luxury retail." He gestured to Alexandra, who took her place beside him. The cameras clicked rapidly as they stood together, presenting a united front. 3 months ago," Alexandra began, her voice clear and steady, "I was promoting to customer experience coordinator at this store. Yes, I had been working as a member of the cleaning staff, and yes, that promotion came after Mr. Blackwood visited the store incognito and witnessed the treatment customers received from various staff members." She paused, making eye contact with different members of the audience. "But what hasn't been reported is that I hold a nearly complete business degree from LSE, that I had to leave my studies not due to academic failure, but to support my family during a health crisis, that during my time as a cleaner, I studied every aspect of this business, from inventory management to customer psychology." Alexandra gestured to the displays around the room. "What also hasn't been reported is this. Since implementing our new inclusive approach to luxury retail, our sales have increased by 30%. Our customer retention rate is at an all-time high. But more importantly, we've created something that cannot be measured in pounds and pence. We've created a community." She motioned to her team, and one by one, they stepped forward to share their stories. James spoke about how his art history expertise now helped customers understand the heritage behind luxury fashion. Sarah shared how her costume design experience transformed their tailoring service. Tommy's story of moving from a Dress for Success participant to valued team member brought tears to several journalists' eyes. Then came the customers. Mrs. Hampshire stood up without prompting. "I've been shopping at Pembroke and Phil's for 30 years, she announced firmly. "Never has it been more welcoming, more professional or more truly luxurious than under Ms. Bennett's leadership." Other customers followed, each with their own story of how the store's new approach had impacted them. A young doctor spoke about buying her first designer bag to celebrate completing her residency. A retired teacher described how he was treated with respect while choosing a special anniversary gift for his wife. As the testimonials continued, Miranda's smug expression gradually faded. When it was time for questions, her allegations seemed to lose their sting in the face of such overwhelming positive evidence. A journalist from The Guardian raised her hand. "Mr. Blackwood, there have been suggestions that Ms. Bennett's rapid promotion was due to personal rather than professional considerations. How do you respond?" Edward's response was measured but firm. "The numbers speak for themselves. Ms. Bennett's leadership has transformed not just this store, but our entire understanding of what luxury retail can be. And yes, during this process, we developed personal feelings for each other. But I can assure you her professional success preceded and exists independently of our personal relationship." Alexandra stepped forward. "If I may add something, luxury has traditionally been about exclusivity, keeping people out. We believe true luxury is about making everyone feel extraordinary, whether they're buying a silk scarf or a bespoke suit. It's about recognizing the dignity and potential in every person who walks through our doors." The press conference continued for another hour, with Alexandra and Edward presenting detailed data about the store's performance and their plans for the future. By the time it concluded, the narrative had shifted dramatically. The story was no longer about scandal. It was about innovation, inclusion, and the transformation of an industry. As the journalists began to pack up their equipment, Edward turned to Alexandra. "There's one more announcement I'd like to make," he said quietly. "If you'll let me?" Alexandra nodded, curious. Edward returned to the podium, reaching for her hand to join him. What he said next would change everything, but that's another chapter in their story. The journalists who had been packing up their equipment suddenly paused as Edward cleared his throat at the podium. Alexandra stood beside him, her heart racing with curiosity about this unexpected addition to their carefully planned press conference. "Before we conclude today," Edward began, his voice taking on a softer tone, "I'd like to make one final announcement." He turned slightly to face Alexandra, though his words were still directed to the assembled crowd. "When I founded the Pembroke and Phil's Foundation for Business Education 15 years ago, it was with a simple goal: to honor my mother's memory by helping others achieve their dreams of business education." A ripple of interest moved through the crowd. The foundation was well known in academic circles, but rarely discussed publicly. Alexandra herself had only learned about it during their dinner conversation. "Today," Edward continued, "I'm pleased to announce that the foundation is expanding its mission. We're establishing the Future Leaders in Luxury Retail program, which will provide full scholarships and mentorship opportunities to promising students who have faced financial hardship in pursuing their education." He gestured to Alexandra. "Ms. Bennett's journey, from business student to cleaner to executive, isn't just an inspiring story. It's a reminder of how many talented individuals we lose when education becomes a privilege rather than a right." The program will initially sponsor 50 students per year, providing not just tuition, but also practical retail experience through paid internships at Pembroke and Phil stores. Alexandra felt tears welling in her eyes as Edward continued. "But this program needs a director, someone who understands both the academic and practical sides of business, someone who knows firsthand the challenges these students will face." He turned to her fully now. "Alexandra, in addition to your role as National Training Director, would you consider taking on this position as well?" The room fell silent. Alexandra felt the weight of every eye upon her, but in that moment she saw only Edward, saw the love and respect in his eyes, the complete faith he had in her abilities. This wasn't just a job offer. It was an opportunity to help others avoid the hardships she had faced. "Yes," she said firmly into the microphone. "Yes, I would be honored." The room erupted in applause, led enthusiastically by Mrs. Hampshire and the store's team. Even some of the journalists were nodding appreciatively, clearly recognizing the story had evolved far beyond the original allegations of favoritism. "One more thing," Edward said, raising his hand for quiet. From his pocket he withdrew a small, aged photograph. "This is my mother," he said, holding it up for the cameras. "Margaret Blackwood. She worked as a cleaner at the original Pembroke and Phil's store for 30 years. Everything I've achieved began with her example, her work ethic, her dignity, her kindness to others regardless of their status. He looked at Alexandra, his eyes soft with emotion. When I visit our stores incognito, I'm not just checking on customer service, I'm looking for people like my mother. People who understand that true value isn't about the price tag on your clothes or the size of your bank account. It's about how you treat others. Alexandra understood that instinctively, just as my mother did. Miranda, still seated in the front row, shifted uncomfortably as Edward continued. So yes, I promoted a cleaner to management, just as old Mr. Pembroke gave a cleaner's son the chance to buy into his business. And I challenge every luxury retailer in Britain to look more closely at their own staff, to recognize that talent, intelligence, and leadership can be found at every level of their organization. The press conference concluded with a wave of positive energy. Journalists crowded around Alexandra, asking about her plans for the Foundation's new program. Several even approached Miranda, but she had already slipped away, her attempts at scandal thoroughly overshadowed by this new narrative of education and opportunity. Later that evening, as the last of the camera crews packed up their equipment, Alexandra and Edward stood together in the quiet store. The golden light of sunset streamed through the windows, making the displays glitter. "You planned this all along, didn't you?" Alexandra asked, touching the vintage brooch Sarah had given her. "The Foundation expansion." Edward smiled, taking her hand. "I've been working on it since the day I met you, but I wanted to wait for the right moment, when you had proven to everyone, beyond any doubt, what I saw in you from the beginning." "And what was that?" "A kindred spirit," he said softly. "Someone who understood that luxury isn't about exclusivity. It's about making people feel valued, about recognizing the extraordinary in everyone." Alexandra leaned into him, watching the last rays of sunlight play across the store's marble floors. "What do you think your mother would say about all this?" "I think," Edward replied, his voice thick with emotion, "she would say it's about time someone remembered what truly matters in business and in life." As they stood there, planning the future of both the store and the Foundation, neither could have predicted the remarkable ways their vision would transform not just Pembroke and Phil's, but the entire landscape of luxury retail in Britain. But that transformation was just beginning, and the best was yet to come. 6 months after the press conference, Alexandra stood in front of an auditorium filled with eager faces at the University of Manchester. The inaugural class of the Future Leaders in Luxury Retail program was about to begin, and she had chosen her hometown for the launch. "Welcome," she began, surveying the 50 students before her. "Each of you has a unique story, a different path that led you here, but you all share something in common: the determination to pursue your dreams despite obstacles." In the back of the room, she spotted her father, quietly observing with pride. He had taken the afternoon off from teaching his mathematics class to watch his daughter's presentation. Beside him sat Edward, who had insisted on being present for this milestone moment. "When I was sitting where you are now," Alexandra continued, "I never imagined my path would lead me here. I was studying business management, dreaming of a career in retail, when life threw me an unexpected challenge." She paused, making eye contact with various students. But what seemed like an ending turned out to be just a different beginning. The presentation screen behind her displayed photographs of the first Pembroke and Phil's store, including one of Edward's mother in her cleaning uniform. This program isn't just about providing education. It's about transforming the luxury retail industry from within, making it more inclusive, more innovative, and more authentic. As she outlined the program, which included full university tuition, mentorship opportunities, and paid internships at Pembroke and Phil's stores, Alexandra could see the hope and excitement building in her audience's eyes. These were students who, like her, had faced financial hardships, family obligations, and various other obstacles to their education. "Your internships will rotate through every department," she explained, "from sales to visual merchandising, from customer service to management. Because true leadership comes from understanding every aspect of the business." After the presentation, as students gathered to ask questions and share their stories, Alexandra noticed a young woman hanging back, clutching her notebook nervously. "Hello," Alexandra approached her with a warm smile. "I'm Alexandra Bennett." "I know," the girl replied softly. "I'm Emma. I work as a cleaner at the Leeds branch of Pembroke and Fills. When I heard about this program, she trailed off, emotion catching in her throat. Alexandra touched her arm gently. Tell me more about yourself, Emma. For the next 15 minutes, they talked about Emma's dreams of designing luxury accessories and her struggle to balance work with her part-time business courses. As they spoke, Edward approached, listening intently to Emma's story. Have you ever shown your designs to anyone? He asked when Emma mentioned her sketchbook. Emma shook her head, but after some encouragement, she opened her notebook to reveal pages of beautifully detailed handbag sketches. Alexandra and Edward exchanged knowing looks. Emma, Alexandra said, how would you feel about being part of a special project we're developing? We're planning to launch a collection designed by our scholarship students, with proceeds funding future programs. The young woman's eyes widened. Really? But I'm just a cleaner. Edward finished with a kind smile. So was my mother. So was Alexandra. Sometimes the most creative perspectives come from unexpected places. Later that evening, Alexandra, Edward, and her father shared dinner at her childhood home. The small kitchen was filled with warmth and the aroma of her father's signature lasagna. I always knew you were meant for more than just getting by, her father said, serving another portion to Edward. Even when you had to leave university, you never stopped learning, never stopped believing. Edward reached for Alexandra's hand under the table. She's extraordinary, he agreed, and now she's helping others find their path too. Alexandra squeezed his hand, thinking about Emma and the other students she'd met today. We're creating something bigger than ourselves, she said. A legacy of opportunity. Speaking of legacy, Edward said, his voice taking on a curious tone, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with both of you. Alexandra turned to him, noticing a familiar glint in his eye, the same one he'd had before announcing the Foundation's expansion. Her father, too, seemed to sense something significant coming. Mr. Bennett, Edward began, straightening in his chair. I know this might seem rather traditional, but I wanted to speak with you before... He reached into his jacket pocket, and Alexandra's heart began to race. The moment was interrupted by the chime of Alexandra's phone, an urgent message from Sarah about a development with their new community initiative. But as Alexandra quickly checked the message, she couldn't help but wonder about what Edward had been about to say. The evening concluded with warm hugs and promises to meet again soon. As they drove back to London, Alexandra noticed Edward seemed lost in thought, occasionally touching his jacket pocket with a slight smile. What she didn't know was that Edward had much bigger plans in mind, plans that would take their vision of transformation and legacy to an entirely new level. The next few weeks would bring changes that neither of them could have anticipated, as their personal and professional lives prepared to take another remarkable turn. The Bond Street store looked magical after hours, with the evening light casting long shadows through the display windows and making the crystal chandeliers sparkle. Alexandra was working late, reviewing applications for the next round of scholarship recipients, when she noticed rose petals scattered across the floor, leading from her office door toward the main showroom. Her heart skipped a beat as she followed the trail, remembering Edward's interrupted attempt to speak with her father the week before. The petals led to the exact spot where they had first met, where she, as a cleaner, had shown kindness to a seemingly shabby stranger. The space had been transformed. Dozens of candles created a warm glow, and in the center stood Edward, wearing the same weathered coat from that fateful day. Behind him, to her amazement, stood her father, Sarah, James, and several of their scholarship students, including Emma. Alexandra, Edward began, his voice soft with emotion, this is where our story began. Where you showed me that true character isn't about appearance or position, but about how we treat others. Where you reminded me of everything my mother believed in and taught me. He reached into the pocket of the old coat and pulled out not a ring box, as Alexandra expected, but a worn leather diary. This was my mother's, he explained. She wrote in it every day, dreaming of a future where luxury wasn't about exclusivity, but about making everyone feel extraordinary. Listen to what she wrote 30 years ago. Edward opened the diary and read, Today, a young girl came into the store with her mother. They couldn't afford anything, but they loved looking at the beautiful things. The sales staff ignored them, but I saw how the girl's eyes lit up at a silk scarf in the window. I helped her try it on, showed her how to tie it properly. Her smile was worth more than all the expensive jewelry in the display cases. "Someday, I hope this industry learns that true luxury is in how you make people feel." He dropped to one knee, and this time did pull out a ring box. "But more than that, you've transformed me. You've shown me that love like luxury isn't about status or appearance. It's about recognizing the extraordinary in each other." Opening the box, he revealed a stunning vintage ring. "This was my mother's engagement ring. She made me promise to give it only to someone who shared her values, her vision of making the world a little more beautiful for everyone. Alexandra Bennett, will you marry me?" Alexandra felt tears streaming down her face as she looked at the ring, then at Edward, and finally at the gathered witnesses, her father beaming proudly, her team watching with joy, and the students whose lives they were helping to change. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, of course I will." As Edward slipped the ring onto her finger, Emma stepped forward with a design portfolio. "We have a surprise for you, Miss Bennett," she said shyly. "All of us scholarship students have been working on something special." The portfolio contained designs for a unique collection, wedding attire that combined luxury with accessibility, created specifically for couples who wanted to make their special day extraordinary without excessive expense. "We're calling it the Bennett Collection," Edward explained. "It will be a permanent line at Pembroke and Phil's, with proceeds supporting the scholarship fund. We want your wedding to be the start of something bigger, a statement that luxury and love should be accessible to everyone." Alexandra's father stepped forward, hugging them both. "Margaret would have been so proud," he said to Edward, then turned to Alexandra. "Just as your mother would have been of you, sweetheart." Later that evening, after celebrations with champagne and tearful toasts, Alexandra and Edward stood alone in the store. She was still wearing his mother's ring, which caught the light of the chandeliers. "I have an idea," Alexandra said suddenly, "for our wedding venue." Edward raised an eyebrow, curious. "What if we held it right here in the store? Not as a private event, but as an open house, inviting all our customers, employees, students, and even the public. We could showcase the new Bennett collection, celebrate with our community, and show everyone that luxury can be warm, inclusive, and real." Edward's face lit up with understanding. "A wedding that's also a statement about everything we believe in. Perfect." He pulled her close. "Though I should warn you, the press will have a field day with this." Alexandra laughed. "Let them. We've always been about breaking down barriers. Why stop now?" As they stood there, surrounded by the beauty they'd helped create and the legacy they were building together, both knew that their wedding would be more than just a celebration of their love. It would be a celebration of transformation, of an industry, of opportunities, and of the power of seeing the extraordinary in every person who walked through their doors. But even they couldn't have predicted just how much their upcoming wedding would change the face of luxury retail in Britain, or the surprising twist that fate had in store for them. The weeks leading up to the wedding transformed Pembroke and Phil's in ways no one could have anticipated. The store had become a hub of activity, with the Bennett collection taking shape under Emma's talented leadership. The young designer had blossomed in her new role, coordinating with other scholarship students to create wedding attire that married luxury with affordability. Alexandra was reviewing the final designs in her office when an unexpected wave of nausea hit her. It was the third time this week. Sarah, who had just brought in the latest prototype of Alexandra's wedding dress, noticed her pale complexion. "Are you all right, dear?" Sarah asked, her experienced eyes studying Alexandra with motherly concern. "You've been looking a bit peaked lately." "I'm fine," Alexandra assured her, though she couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Probably just wedding stress. But later that afternoon, during a doctor's appointment, she'd finally agreed to attend at Edward's insistence. Alexandra received news that would add another extraordinary chapter to their story. "Twins," the doctor announced, smiling as she pointed to the ultrasound screen. "Congratulations, Miss Bennett. You're expecting 2 little ones." Alexandra stared at the screen in wonder, tears forming in her eyes. She had always wanted children, but twins, it seemed perfect, like a blessing doubled. Her hand went instinctively to her stomach as she thought about how to share this news with Edward. That evening she arranged to meet him in their special place, the spot in the store where they first met. She found him reviewing the wedding seating arrangements, which had become quite complex given their decision to make it an open celebration. "Edward," she said softly, touching his arm. When he turned to face her, she handed him a small box tied with a ribbon. Inside were 2 tiny Pembroke and Phil's shopping bags, each containing a miniature version of the cleaning uniform his mother had once worn. Edward's expression shifted from confusion to dawning realization. "Alexandra, are you—" She nodded, happy tears spilling down her cheeks. "Twins. We're having twins." Edward pulled her into his arms, his own eyes glistening. "Twins," he repeated in wonder. 2 little ones to carry on the legacy. The news transformed their wedding plans in the most wonderful way. The Bennett collection quickly expanded to include a maternity line, with Alexandra herself becoming the first model. The press caught wind of the pregnancy, and suddenly their wedding became an even more powerful symbol of new beginnings and transformation. Emma and her team incorporated subtle design elements to accommodate Alexandra's changing figure, while maintaining the collection's message of accessible luxury. The resulting designs were so innovative that several fashion magazines requested exclusive coverage. One evening, as they walked through the store after hours, making final preparations for the wedding that was now just days away, Edward stopped at the window display featuring the Bennett collection. "Look at what you've created," he said proudly, gesturing to the elegant yet affordable wedding attire that would soon be available in all their stores. "And now we'll have 2 more dreamers to carry it forward." Alexandra leaned into him, her hand resting on her growing bump. "I was thinking," she said, "about names. What if we named them after our mothers, Margaret and Rose, or if they're boys, Martin and Robert?" Edward's arms tightened around her. "Perfect, though something tells me they're girls. 2 strong, compassionate girls who'll grow up understanding that true value lies in how we treat others." As they stood there, surrounded by the beauty they'd created together, Alexandra thought about the journey that had brought them here. From cleaner to executive, from strangers to soulmates, from dreamers to parents, every step had led them to this moment. The store's evening lights cast a warm glow around them, making the engagement ring on her finger sparkle, the same ring that had once belonged to another woman who believed in making luxury accessible to all. Now it would be part of a new story, one that included 2 little lives who would grow up understanding that the greatest luxury in life was the ability to help others achieve their dreams. "Tomorrow's the final fitting for my dress," Alexandra said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Sarah's made some adjustments to accommodate our little surprises." Edward kissed her temple softly. "I can't wait to see you in it, though I fell in love with you in a cleaner's uniform, so anything else is just extra decoration." They laughed together, the sound echoing through the quiet store. Outside, London's evening crowds hurried past the windows, some pausing to admire the Bennett collection display. Tomorrow would bring more preparations, more excitement, and more steps toward their shared vision of transforming luxury retail. But for now, in this peaceful moment, they simply held each other, feeling the tiny movements of their twins, the next generation of dreamers who would help carry forward their legacy of making extraordinary moments accessible to all. The wedding was just days away, and with it would come a celebration not just of their love, but of everything they believed in, that every person deserved to feel extraordinary, that true luxury was about inclusion rather than exclusion, and that the greatest achievements came from lifting others up along with yourself. What they didn't know was that their wedding day would bring one final surprise, a moment that would perfectly encapsulate everything their journey had been about, and everything it would continue to be. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear over London. Pembroke and Phil's had been transformed into an enchanted space that perfectly embodied Alexandra and Edward's vision of accessible luxury. The store's grand windows were draped with delicate silk flowers, while inside, the displays had been arranged to create an intimate ceremony space that still allowed the Bennett collection to shine. Alexandra stood in her office, now converted into a bridal suite, as Sarah made the final adjustments to her dress, a masterpiece of the Bennett collection. The gown, with its flowing lines and innovative design, had been created to accommodate her growing bump, while maintaining an air of timeless elegance. More importantly, it had been designed to be reproducible at a price point that would make it accessible to brides of varying means. "Look who's here," her father said, entering the room with Emma, who carried a small gift box. "Ms. Bennett," Emma began, her voice trembling slightly with emotion, "the scholarship students and I wanted to give you something special. She opened the box to reveal a delicate silver brooch, crafted in the shape of a key. "We designed this together. It represents how you and Mr. Blackwood opened doors for all of us. We are launching it as part of the permanent collection, with all proceeds going to the scholarship fund." Alexandra hugged Emma carefully, mindful of her dress. "It's perfect," she whispered, as Sarah pinned it alongside the vintage brooch she'd worn at the press conference. The main floor of the store had been arranged with chairs for their special guests, but the upper gallery was open to the public, following their wish to make their celebration truly inclusive. Already, a crowd had gathered, customers, employees, students, and curious passers-by, all drawn to this unprecedented event. As Alexandra prepared to make her entrance, she caught sight of something that made her pause. Through the store's windows, she could see a group of people gathering outside, holding signs. For a moment, her heart stopped, but then she read the messages. "Thank you for making dreams accessible. Proud Bennett Collection student. Luxury is for everyone. They're from all over the country," her father explained, seeing her expression. "People whose lives have been touched by your programs. They came to celebrate with you." The ceremony itself was everything they had dreamed of and more. Edward waited at the front of the store, standing exactly where they had first met. As Alexandra walked toward him on her father's arm, wearing a dress that represented their vision of accessible luxury, she saw tears in Edward's eyes. The celebrant spoke of love, of transformation, and of the power of seeing the extraordinary in every person. But the most touching moment came during the vows, when Edward pulled out his mother's diary again. "Alexandra," he began, his voice rich with emotion, "on the day we met you saw past appearances to the person beneath, just as my mother always did. Today, I make these promises not just to you, but to our growing family and to the legacy we're building together." He placed a hand gently on her bump. "I vow to continue seeing the extraordinary in every person we meet, to keep making luxury accessible to all, and to raise our daughters to understand that true value lies in how we treat others." Alexandra's own vows spoke of transformation, of dreams made real, and of the power of love to change not just hearts but entire industries. As they exchanged rings, the crowd above erupted in applause that seemed to shake the very foundations of the historic building. But the real surprise came during the reception. Miranda Rothschild appeared at the entrance, looking nervous but determined. She carried a large envelope. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said quickly, as security moved toward her. "I'm here to make amends." The envelope contained her resignation from their competitors' board and a complete retraction of her allegations. "You've proved me wrong," she admitted. "What you're doing here, it's revolutionary. And I'd like to help, if you'll let me." Edward and Alexandra exchanged glances, then smiled. "Alexandra, there's always room for one more dream maker," Alexandra said, extending her hand to her former adversary. As the celebration continued, Alexandra and Edward slipped away for a quiet moment in her old office. The space still held her cleaning cart, now decorated with white ribbons, a reminder of where their journey began. "Look," Edward said, pointing out the window. The street below was filled with people, some in designer clothes, others in simple attire, all celebrating together. Through the store's speakers, they could hear Emma presenting the full Bennett collection to enthusiastic applause. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" Alexandra said, feeling their twins move as if in agreement. "The beginning of everything," Edward confirmed, pulling her close. "A new chapter for Pembroke and Phil's, for our family, and for everyone who dreams of making luxury mean something more than exclusivity." As they rejoined their guests, Alexandra looked around at what they had created together. A store transformed into a place of opportunity, a collection that made dreams accessible, and a community united by the belief that everyone deserved to feel extraordinary. The sun was setting over London, casting a golden glow through the store's windows. In that light, every person, whether wearing designer labels or simple clothes, shone with the same radiance. It was exactly as Edward's mother had written in her diary so many years ago. True luxury wasn't about what you wore or what you could afford, it was about how you made others feel. And as Alexandra and Edward danced their first dance as husband and wife, surrounded by their extended family of dreamers and changemakers, they knew that their love story had become something bigger than themselves. It had become a legacy of transformation, a testament to the power of seeing the extraordinary in every person, and a promise that would live on through their daughters and every life they touched. "Ready for our next adventure?" Edward whispered as they danced. Alexandra smiled, thinking of their twins, their growing programs, and all the dreams yet to be realized. "With you?" "Always,"